Welcome to Mobius 8 Organics. Today we're diving into the world of indoor worm composting, also known as vermicomposting. Now, if you're new to this, you might think it's a little unusual, but let me tell you, it's like having a little piece of the farm right in your own home. If your worm bin isn't running smoothly, don't worry. We've all been there. I remember when my kids and I first started worm composting. Let's just say, we had a few learning curves along the way, but that's what this journey is all about, right? Learning and growing together. We're here to help you troubleshoot and keep your composting worms happy and healthy, because a happy worm means happy soil, and happy soil means a happier planet. Here at Mobius 8 Organics, we like to make greener choices for a greener planet, and worm composting is a greener choice. Now, a properly maintained worm bin should have this wonderful, earthy aroma. It kind of reminds me of the smell of fresh soil after a good rain. But if your bin smells bad, it's likely due to a few common things. Don't worry, we can fix it. First things first, let's check for excess moisture. Just like our gardens outside, too much moisture can throw things out of whack. If the bedding feels soggy, it's like having a soggy bottom on a pie, not good. We need to dry things out a bit. Make sure there is sufficient drainage in your bin. Add some holes in the bottom to let the excess moisture flow. Then add some dry materials like shredded newspaper or cardboard. Think of it like adding extra layers to a cozy bed. Another thing that can cause a stink is improper food waste. Now, our worms love their veggies, but there are some things they just can't digest well, like dairy, meat, or oily foods. These things decompose slowly and can really make the bin smell unpleasant. And speaking of food, overfeeding can be a big culprit too. Remember, worms have small appetites. Just like us, they can only eat so much at a time, so don't overload the bin. Now, I know it can be tempting to give your worms a little treat now and then, but trust me, they'll be much happier with a balanced diet. Allow them to finish eating between their feedings. Let's stick to those fruit and veggie scraps, eggshells and coffee grounds. They love that stuff. And remember, keep the bin at a comfortable temperature. So, you open your worm bin, and suddenly you see tiny little gnats flying around. Don't panic. Those are probably fruit flies, and they're about as welcome in our worm bin as, well, a leaky faucet in the middle of a renovation. But just like any good renovation project, we can tackle this problem head-on. The main thing is to make the bin less appealing to these pesky critters. Fruit flies and gnats are drawn to exposed food scraps, so we need to be a little more stealthy with our worms' meals. Make sure to bury those food scraps deeper into the bedding, ensuring they're fully covered. Think of it like tucking the worms into bed with a nice cozy blanket of bedding. And just for good measure, let's add an extra layer of protection. A layer of moist newspaper or cardboard on top of the bedding acts as a barrier. Remember, we don't want to seal the bin completely, just make it a little less inviting for those uninvited guests. And just like with the bad smells, overfeeding can attract pests. It's like leaving a buffet out on the counter, an open invitation for trouble. Freezing your scraps will also help. Just remember to defrost to room temperature before adding them to your worm bin. So, let's stick to a regular feeding schedule and avoid giving those pests any reason to stick around. And remember, keeping the bin at a comfortable temperature will also help keep your worms happy and pests at bay. You know, worms aren't exactly known for being escape artists, but if you find them making a break for it, it's a sure sign something's not quite right in their little world. It's like when my contractor gets a little too enthusiastic with a demolition project and I start looking for the nearest exit. Just like us, worms need their space and the right environment to thrive. One of the most common reasons for a worm jailbreak is poor aeration. Worms need to breathe just like we do, and without proper ventilation, those oxygen levels can take a nosedive. So make sure your bin has plenty of air holes and that they're clear and unobstructed. Another thing that can make worms feel a little claustrophobic is incorrect moisture levels. Now, we've already talked about how too much moisture can be a problem, but did you know that a too dry bin can be just as bad? The bedding should be moist like a wrung-out sponge, not too wet and not too dry. And while we're on the subject of bedding, let's talk about acidity. Just like certain foods don't sit well with us, some things can make a worm bin too acidic. Citrus fruits and onions, while good for us, can make the bin inhospitable for our little composting buddies. So, everything in moderation, right? And don't forget, worms thrive best in temperatures between 15 to 25 degrees Celsius. Keep an eye on that thermometer. Now, a little mold in your worm bin is perfectly normal. It's a natural part of the decomposition process. Think of it like a special seasoning on the worm's food. They love it. However, if you start to see a fuzzy forest growing in your bin, it might be time to take action. Excessive fungal growth is usually a sign of an imbalance in the system. Too much moisture, not enough air circulation. You know the drill. But don't worry, we've got this. Just like we'd tackle a messy room, let's start by giving the bedding a good mix. This helps improve airflow and breaks up those moldy patches. And if the bin is feeling a bit damp, add some dry bedding materials to soak up the excess moisture. Now, if you spot any large chunks of moldy food, it's best to remove them altogether. No use in tempting fate, right? We want to give our worms the best possible environment to do their thing. Remember, a happy worm is a composting machine. Imagine this. You've prepped a delicious meal, only to find that your kids aren't touching their food. Frustrating, right? Well, that's kinda how it feels when your worms go on a hunger strike. You offer them a smorgasbord of kitchen scraps and they just sit there. But before you start questioning your composting skills, let's investigate a little further. Sometimes it's not that the worms aren't hungry, it's that the food is not exactly appealing. Just like we appreciate a fine vintage of wine, worms prefer their food to be seasoned with a bit of age and decomposition. So instead of tossing in large chunks of fruit or veggie scraps, try freezing them to break down the organic matter a bit faster. And just like us, worms don't like to be rushed when it comes to mealtime. If you've recently given them a feast, they might just need a little time to digest. So, don't panic if the food doesn't disappear overnight. Patience, my friend, patience. Lastly, let's check the thermostat. Worms are a little like Goldilocks when it comes to temperature. They like it just right. So find a cozy spot for your bin, away from drafts and extreme temperatures, and away from any vibrations like near a clothes dryer. Thanks for watching. Remember, even the most experienced worm composters encounter challenges now and then. It's all part of the learning process. Just like with any good renovation project, it's about taking things one step at a time, learning as we go, and not being afraid to get our hands dirty. By taking the time to identify and resolve any issues that arise, you'll be rewarded with happy worms and nutrient-rich compost for your garden. And the bonus is, you've helped the planet by reducing your food waste. And that, my friends, is a beautiful thing. If you have specific questions or need more tips, don't hesitate to reach out or visit our YouTube channel for detailed guides and inspiration. We're in this together, and I'm always excited to hear about your composting adventures. Ready to keep your worm bin thriving? Share your experiences in the comments or tag us on social media with your composting success stories. Let's work together to create a healthier planet, one worm bin at a time. For more tips and tricks on composting, organic growing, and sustainable living, follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Mobius 8 Organics. Let's make composting easy and fun.